All right, good evening. Today is Tuesday, June 27th. This is the regular meeting of the Rhinebeck Central School District Board of Education. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the June 13th, 2017 regular meeting?
So moved. Second.
Are there any revisions to the minutes? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. There's an opportunity for public comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to make a comment at this time? Okay, seeing none, we move on to reports and discussion. And we have on our agenda recognition of retiring Board of Education members, Deirdre Burns and Lisa Rosenthal. So I'm going to turn the program over to Deirdre because she has some remarks prepared.
You know me. I do have a few remarks prepared. And please don't let them preclude others from making remarks. But I'm going to begin with Lisa. So, Lisa.
Thank you for being here.
Lisa Rosenthal, we salute you for your distinguished service to our community since your 2012 election to the Rhinebeck Board of Education, bringing formidable knowledge of law and public policy to our work around this table. You have represented all segments of this community with conscientious integrity. Especially appreciated when you went to speak to some of our senior members of the community to get their perspective on issues. Over the years, we have counted on you for steady, measured inquiry in all matters. Your creative and courageous interventions during budget season, in particular, must be highlighted as materially influencing the future of our district for the better. When Trustee Richard Walker was called away from board service, you generously stepped in to fill his seat. The joy with which your decision was greeted by all of us should have given you some indication of the high esteem in which you are held by your peers. You are a coalition builder and an incisive, critical thinker. We have all benefited from your willingness to ask frank questions and to propose bold solutions. We have grown as a board thanks to you, even as you have demonstrated your sustained commitment to professional growth and development in your role as a trustee. The many hours you devoted to work on fine-grained, detail-oriented issues with the facilities and the policy committees, for instance, the insight you developed through your ex officio role with the Rhinebeck Science Foundation, your dry wit, and your selfless dedication to the collegial flourishing of Rhinebeck and its schools must be acknowledged tonight with our warmest gratitude.
Lisa? My goodness. Oh, they're coming out of the woodwork now.
We love you, Lisa. And we're so glad you're sticking around for this meeting. All right, now this is even harder for me to do. Deirdre Burns. We have had many legendary trustees in Rhinebeck. I have admired them from afar, from the first open house I attended, but none have served with more distinction than you. In your 15-year tenure on this board, you have tirelessly spoken out in support of public education. I often think of a motto you coined one day in the Communications Committee as we wondered how best to speak about the everyday wonders that occur in Rhinebeck between educators and students, and between the students themselves, in classrooms, labs, hallways, on the playing fields. We've spent a lot of time watching the playing fields, the art studio, and on stage. This is what public education looks like. And you help us to see that every day. And you have been our most forceful and eloquent champion for educating what used to be called the whole child. I don't know if we say it anymore, but I still believe in it. Not just the test taker, not just the enrollment statistic, but the young human being who is beginning his or her journey through life here with us. Your training in mediation, your commitment to restorative justice, your principled and outspoken critique of No Child Left Behind and all the other legislation that has followed in its wake has been a beacon to us in understanding our role as trustees. Advocacy in particular has been a board goal you have brought vividly to life over the years. You have led us with articulate conviction as a vice president and as a president, as a trustee. You have taught us to be brave. You've participated basically in every committee we have with great distinction. And I often think of you as someone who's very much connected with the generation of CISB, which to me was, again, a kind of welcoming group in our community. And it's this acronym, which stands for Community in Support of Public Education, was formative, I think, in terms of bringing in Dean Vallis and yourself into service here on the board. You represent a particularly crucial perspective through your leadership with Culture Connect, formerly Young Rhinebeck, especially in this time of inward-looking anxiety and suspicion. You teach young people courageously to move out into an often daunting and diverse global environment. Your upcoming trip as chaperone next month to Madagascar perfectly exemplifies the optimism, toughness, and selfless support of young adults that has been the hallmark of your board service. Thank you for your deeply intelligent, compassionate, and rigorously critical voice. You have played a heroic role in shaping the district of which we are all so proud today. You are a fighter, and we cannot wait to see what you will do next. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I just thank you so much. Thank you for those kind words. I'm obviously turning it over to another Deirdre, who's fantastic in her own right. But you know, I just want to say it's really been such a pleasure, and I think one of the there's this like mythology around school board service that it's like awful, right? Like, oh, who would do this? And you know, I think it's fantastic, right? I mean, it's really great, and I think it's something we should try to work to let people know. I mean, in many ways, this is just a model for deliberative policy making and organizational management. I mean, and democracy. So, and we do it really well here. It's been a fantastic experience. I've had so many wonderful colleagues. All of you, thank you so much. I've learned from everybody, and what's great is we learn from each other. In a time when really there are not good models out there for sort of like collaborative thinking and working together to develop policy and move people forward in an organization. This is like a democratic organization. We really, we should somehow try to figure out how to communicate that, because it really does work here. And we deal with a lot of issues that people in our community don't even realize, at the national level to what happens in a classroom every day. So it has been incredibly intellectually stimulating and gratifying. I've learned so much. And I would just encourage all of you to continue that tradition that we do have here of really communicating well, you know, listening, disagreeing when we do, and moving through that. And also, I want to thank Joe tremendously, because we've been in this together this whole time. And I've learned so much from you as well. We've worked together so terrifically. And I think the humanity that you bring to your job is also what leads us and keeps this a district that focuses on people more than data. And that's what I would just encourage my colleagues to continue to do. But thank you so much. It's really, it's been a privilege. And a great way to develop a purple wardrobe.
you know, all the years I've been on the board, there's been a lot of board members that have come and gone, and all of them are great. But I have to say, Deirdre and Lisa, you know, you always come to the table with something constructive to say, something positive to say, and it's just been a wonderful experience to have both of you on board. So thank you very much for your service. You will be missed, definitely. Diane.
I think everything's been said, but just personally, Lisa, we started this journey together, you and I don't know what we'll do without you. 5 years on policy, you'll definitely be missed. Thank you for your friendship. And Deirdre, I appreciate your leadership. When I came on, you were a mentor for me, and you'll definitely be missed. Thank you for all your help over the years.
Well, you know, I always have an opinion about everything. So I'm happy to, you know, if you need a community member or any kind of service, call on me.
I'll let the minutes reflect that.
Yeah, right. I know where you live.
Laura?
It happens.
It does.
Yes, we do have 2 board members who left and then came back.
That's right. It's a theme. We like it here so much. To both of you, thank you endlessly. It's, you know, as you pointed out here earlier, we agree when we don't agree. We always work together for our this. That is really the driving thing behind this board. And it's really been an incredible pleasure working with both of you.
All right, Joe?
Anything I could say at this point about Deirdre and Lisa would be somewhat redundant, so I won't. But I do want to take this opportunity to reflect for a couple of minutes on an evening of lasts and firsts. Okay, in terms of lasts, you know, this is Deirdre's last board meeting. Not so Lisa, because given the vagaries of how the commissioner's regulations work, Lisa actually left the board after the election, and Jacqueline took her place. But we're glad you were able to join us tonight. I also wanted to mention before we take the inevitable break for cake that. Mary Ann Torres, who has served the board as board clerk for the last several years. Tonight's her last meeting as board clerk. Fortunately, for those of us who work in the school district, this is not her last hurrah as an employee of the school district. She'll continue to keep Mr. Krebs in line. But I wanted to take the opportunity to thank her publicly for her service in this position and give you some flowers. We will also be providing Deirdre and Lisa with a lovely parting token of our appreciation, which didn't make its way back from the engravers in time, but I'll look forward to your friendly neighborhood superintendent delivering that to your door one of these days very soon. In terms of firsts, I want to acknowledge 2 firsts. First of all, I believe that in the last, I could be wrong, and if I am wrong, I will be summarily corrected. But in my 19 years here in the district, I believe this is the first time my wife has ever attended a board meeting. And for very good reason. Just goes to show all of you how much our departing board members mean to her. And she did get the flowers. So, you know, I want to give credit where credit is due. Thank you, hon. And I also wanted to take this opportunity to introduce Whitney Drucker. Whitney's over there in the corner. Whitney is the, you got 4, sure. those members of the board will have Whitney sitting in Mary Ann's seat. She's our new board clerk, whom you appointed at our last meeting. But I wanted to have the opportunity to introduce her not only to you but to the public. Whitney is the personnel assistant in our office, and we're glad to have her working there as well as in the board clerk's position. So welcome, Whitney. Thanks for being here tonight. And that's all I have to say about that.
All right, may I have a motion to suspend the rules so that we can have cake?
So moved. Second.
All right, all those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes.
All right.
Pause for cake. All right, thank you, everyone. So we'll move on to board goals, 2016-17 review and 2017-18 development.
Okay, so in your packets under item 4.2 are the board goals that were adopted last August, August 2016, and traditionally we put an item on our agenda to reflect at some level on the goals from the year just passed, with with an eye on looking forward to 2017-18. We've already had some discussions about this, but there's an opportunity for any board members who might want to comment or reflect. So the floor is open for our board members to do so if they wish.
I'll just start off. We knew going in with 5 goals that we were, maybe biting off a little more than we could chew, but I think, we at least did something on all of these goals. Of course, the facilities project took up a big chunk of time in the fall, so we were able to get the project passed, and it's ongoing. As for the others, they're not finished, but we've at least started something with all of them, so progress is being made. So, would anyone else like to comment? Deirdre?
Well, clearly the school start time, pilot has now come to a conclusion, and it's just what we're going to be doing. So I think that's terrific. And I just want to highlight one thing that I have heard again and again, which is a good model, because this isn't just about the school start time, was the showing of the film screenings.
Screenagers, yeah.
And I heard from many people how that was really impactful. So, and from people who the kids don't go to school here, I guess there were people who had heard about it. So I would just say that was a great model, and that was the Health and Wellness Committee, as I understand it.
We're already putting next year's program together.
Oh, that's great. So, yeah, I mean, the rest of them we have their works in progress. I was like 5, we always try to keep them less than that, so just,
Laura?
Yeah, I would like to say on that second goal, the social and emotional wellness, we have made a really great start, and the school start was, by most accounts, a raging success. I would like not to lose sight of this emotional wellness of our kids moving forward. Sometimes goals aren't explicitly written, so they're not really concentrated on so much in ongoing years, but I think this is important given everything we've learned from our personnel service people, and just seeing kids and what they're doing and what we hear they're getting up to. So I would like to keep this in our sights moving forward in the next couple of years.
We have a survey that will be out in September, a social emotional survey that will be for the staff, the children, and the parents.
Is that different from the school climate model?
No,
the school climate,
yeah,
but it gets into
yeah.
that type of information. So,
Great.
And there's a connection there with our CDEP plan, of course. So.
I have a question in relationship to that survey and the work of the Wellness Committee. Tom, you serve on that.
on the health and wellness, yes.
Yeah, it'd be great to build in an opportunity into the agenda, maybe at like one point throughout the year where you can just talk with us, since not everyone has access through their community committee service to updates on the work that's going on there. Maybe we could just
Do that.
calendar it to kind of get a sense of the priorities, focus for the year, and that might then feed back out into our committees setting their own agendas.
Okay, I can get Dave Airstock too. He's the
Oh, great, and if he wants,
he's
if
the
he wouldn't
chairperson.
mind.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, he wouldn't.
Okay.
He wouldn't at all.
Okay.
That's a good idea. Diane?
I just wanted to just touch on the capital project. I mean, obviously it was a lot of work, but I think it doesn't go this well in every district, and I think it's important to note that the way that it was run and the outreach to the community was part of why it came to a successful part. I mean, we've seen neighboring districts not be that successful. So, you know, the way that I think it's similar to the school start, the way that we engaged the community and the way the project was led led us to these outcomes. As far as goals for next year, I guess that's a little bit part of that. Yeah, I think 5 was probably too much, but in the past we've sent emails with ideas, so I don't know if the process was, if that's the way we want to do it again, to get a jump start on what we're looking for, so everybody can kind of get thoughts and start thinking it through. Still what people want to do.
Well, one of the ideas that had been brought up at one of our previous meetings, and it doesn't necessarily mean we're locked into that, but a number of you had talked about this year the goal being long-range planning, but that it could have several different layers underneath it. So I mean that's just one concept to think about. If the board wants to cast a broader net, that's fine, and that's why this is on the agenda too. We should be starting to think about what our goals might be, because we'll also, I think our most daunting goal would be to find a block of several hours later in the summer when we're all available, so we can sit down and work our way through that process. It hasn't always been possible for us to get together during the summer, but I think if we can, we should try to do that. If not, then we'll have to be a little later in the year. So I just throw that idea out to the board as you think, and it would be nice to come back at our meeting on July 11th with some idea of what direction we want that to take. Because if we don't do it then, we'll be in the beginning of August, and summer will, for all intents and purposes, be shot. So I can just give it some thought, especially between now and our next meeting, and see if we can generate some consensus as to a direction anyways.
Laura?
On that idea of the long-range planning being the one and only goal with things that chunk out, it would be, and the difficulty we're having trying to find a date that we can all get together in the summer, I really feel very strongly that we try to find that date, because I think we generate a lot of ideas when we have those workshops, and they're all really good ideas, and to have one goal, I think we need to be really specific about what those, steps within that goal are, what our colleagues are interested in having that, because the long-range planning committee has got a charter, but without input from everybody, we sort of operate a little bit in a vacuum. So I think it's really important that everybody participate in that conversation as much as possible. So.
Well, it would probably be helpful to facilitate that for the individuals who are going to be on the 2017-18 board to maybe email me dates and times of day, morning, afternoon, evening. I mean, we've done them in the morning, and we're not limited to doing it as an evening meeting, but if you can let me know what weeks and what time or times of day you'd be available, I'll attempt to distill that into some possible dates, assuming there is any overlap. But if we don't start with that, we won't get very far. So I would ask those of you who are on the board for the coming year to send me an email within the next week or so, and hopefully by July 11th we could see if there's a day or dates that we can nail down, so,
That'd be great.
yep.
Diane?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be great if we could do that. Those have been very successful, so if we could do that, that'd be great. And I think the emailing ahead of time was helpful, and I mean, I think most people made it clear that long-range planning is going to be our goal. Whether it's the only goal, I'm not sure, but I think, we do have 2 new members on the board, so, sending those ideas, something may generate that we need another goal or 2 other goals, or maybe not. But, I think that's helpful for everybody to kind of start thinking about it and throwing the ideas out there, even if they're just kind of abstract.
Deirdre?
I just want to say something about what has emerged out of these goals that might inform our work moving forward, which is to say, we often have ideas about plans and we implement them and then we have unforeseen consequences. We saw that with the school start time, and a lot of what we were doing in year 2 was thinking about, how do we rise to the challenge of implementing what it is that we largely determined to be successful. And I think some of the unforeseen consequences out of having many goals is that we learned certain things about how we can work together as a board from some of these different goals that I feel quite confident will inform our work moving forward, which is to say, with the capital project, we had a very successful, limited engagement with a community task force. And that input was enormously helpful, and I think was probably instrumental in educating people in the community about what they were voting on in December. I think that the school start time experience also was consultative in a different way, and it created a kind of model for an ad hoc committee to drive ideas out to the full board, and that strikes me as helpful. And of course, we did have as a goal district enrollment planning, but it was really the experience of going through this year's extremely challenging budget cycle that has changed some of our thinking about how to move forward on that. And that really was something we couldn't have seen when we articulated the goal up front. So even when we don't complete a goal or move all the way to the end of what we imagined might have happened with that goal in a 1-year cycle, I think it's important to recognize the things that we've learned that can be useful with reapproaching that goal, resetting the goal for the following year.
Anything else? All right, so just to reiterate, please email Joe with dates that you're available for a workshop on goals this summer. Hopefully we can get that scheduled within the next couple of weeks. Yeah. All right, next up on the agenda is board committee reports, and we'll start with long-range planning.
Those are mine. So we had our second meeting. We'll have our third tomorrow. Tom was reporting to us. He went to the ASBO, Association of School Business Officers convention up in Lake Placid, and came back with information from that session for us. Little known fact, there is new legislation that was attached to the budget this year that mandates long-range planning for all school districts. And one of its requirements is that schools have to include a schedule of all their reserve funds, the purpose of them, the balances, and the plans for future use in our budget brochure every year. We certainly will do that, and Tom's going to compile that. In these minutes, you might notice that I've bolded some things. I'm trying to call out things that other standing committees should also sort of put in their to-do list. So if this works for us and helps to try to keep every committee sort of up to speed on what we're talking about, that's great. If not, if there's a better way to do it, let me know. But Tom pointed out that he's most concerned about, as our reserves are depleted, the only way that we're going to be able to add monies back to them is through the budget. Typically we have, we always get board approval for adding monies to any particular reserves. That's also a mandate of this new law, but we don't really have the budget headroom to be able to add money to our reserves. So it's a concern that we have to be really careful about. In terms of forecasting, they were suggesting or recommending that we schools take sort of a 5-year historical view of what has happened with your fund balances and reserves and debt service and all of that, so that you can make a 3-year projection moving forward. And that assumptions need to be documented really well so that as the plan evolves, you can assess whether or not those assumptions were accurate or need adjustment, that kind of thing. Obviously, the instructional plan for our long-range plan is going to be the thing that's under the microscope most specifically. So it's really important that the CDEP team be brought into discussions around this planning, and that the communications committee work really hard to make a completely transparent effort at pushing information out to our community. In terms of engaging the community, we've talked a little bit about survey, about things that people are thinking about, ideas that they might have. And Deirdre suggested, and we all sort of agreed, that we hold listening sessions, that we invite the community to come just talk to us. We don't have an agenda necessarily, other than maybe trying to organize it around a set topic of discussion. Hopefully those topics will come up through the surveys. And also to have those same kind of sessions with the faculty and staff. We need to try to apply faculty ingenuity to this challenge of ours, and I'm sure that many of them will have ideas. Part of this seminar that Tom went to was put on by this company, Forecast 5, which has product, of course, as so many of them do. But it helps develop forecast models for schools. You can play with what-if scenarios, track assumptions, generate reports that actually have really nice graphics for visuals for communication. It's an $8,000 annual expense, and Tom's a little concerned about that, but we also talked about the idea that it's important to have the right tool to be able to create the product. So he's getting some more information about 2 other tools that he might feel more comfortable using if Forecast 5 is not the right one, so he'll report back to us on that. And then we finished up by looking at we talked about last time, our statistical neighbors. Tom ran the spreadsheet of all the school districts in New York State based on their financial position, their combined wealth ratio, and enrollment. And so we're going to work, hopefully part of our meeting tomorrow, at sort of identifying the top 10 that are looking a little bit like Rhinebeck, so that we can talk to them, get ideas about what their programs are looking like, what they're doing in terms of the enrollment front and financing their programs. So stay tuned.
Questions for long-range plan? Steve?
I would just recommend with the outreach to the community that you also try to get a hold of some of the former students that have gone on to college, maybe at different levels, to see what they think of what they were taught here, what prepared them well for college, maybe what was lacking. They're here over the summer, so if that could happen sooner than later, that would be great.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Diane?
I think we actually send a survey out. Didn't we do that? Ed, sorry to put you on the spot. But for graduating students, didn't we survey them?
We did a number of years ago. The response rate wasn't encouraging. The building level planning team this year plans on surveying recent grads. We did a senior exit survey. As part of that survey, we asked students with permission to have their email, their cell phone numbers, and text messages up close to to reach out to them at the end of the next school year, see how the first year to see how Rhinebeck has been able to. So that'll give us a snapshot of this year.
Right. Okay. Well, sounds good. Good start. That's a great idea.
And then Tom, I don't know what we found out with the SuperVal, is the software potentially BOCES aidable?
Oh, yeah.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay, so then the cost would be less.
Yeah, it would be less.
Right. You lay it out the first year, you get reimbursement the
Right.
second year.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? I will move on to the Finance Committee.
That's me. So we talked about the cafeteria profit and loss, and comparing last year from May to this year, the loss is about $25,867 as compared to last May, which was $11,607. Some of the reasons for this are replacing a freezer, an increase in food price, and then there was a payment of salary that was made in May instead of June, so there's a difference there. Tom and Larry had discussed raising prices, and they felt that we were already at the top of the scale for lunch prices, so they didn't feel that we should raise those prices yet, but possibly the a la carte items. And the committee, those hadn't been raised in a while, so the committee was in support of that. Looking at participation numbers, the numbers are lower, and that's most likely due to declining enrollment when you look at the numbers, which brought up the idea that long-range planning committee will need to look at the cafeteria as well. As the number of kids go down, potentially the losses in the cafeteria could go up, so that'll have to be part of that planning on, those losses and what that means. Tom went over some requests for proposals. We talked about the bus contract that could be rebid in 2 years' time, and it could just be rolled over, or if there's changes that we want to make, then it's rebid at that time. It doesn't get rolled over. Budget transfers. We overspent for long-term subs, tutors, and then class coverage by teachers when subs aren't available. Coaching, but Tom was going to look at that. It's possible that co-curricular was put into coaching. Sometimes that could be a mistake. He was going to double check that. Let's see. And some additional expenses for next year's with special education, taking up the placeholders that we have, so that everybody's aware of that. And then there's going to be a need for 2 additional aides for some new students. Possibly.
Yep.
Okay. I thought those are definite. Sorry. And then the audit just finished up, and that seems to have gone well. There were some suggestions made with processes for extracurricular. They'd like to see the students more involved, and the treasurer having minutes from clubs and having the treasurers more involved in that process. The full report will be out, but probably not until the fall, and that will be made public.
Questions for the Finance Committee? Jacqueline?
A couple of just explanation. When you talk about the 2 placeholders, what does that mean?
So those,
You talked,
Tom could.
when I put a budget together, I always anticipate that additional kids will show up that we don't account for.
Right.
So I put
So you,
I put at least 2 places in there, and we've
Okay.
already,
They could be gone already
There's-
this year.
right.
They're full.
Full already. And then also in looking at the cafeteria, the difference between last year and this year, I noticed the federal reimbursement had a meaningful
yeah.
number.
They're not
that was
reimbursing as
different.
much, and we've served fewer meals to our free and reduced than we did the year before. So they're reducing the amount they give to us, and we didn't have as many meals this year as last year.
Gotcha.
Okay. Laura?
This was also mentioned in the audit committee, but Diane, you mentioned in your minutes about having clubs keep minutes and the auditor wanting to see those kinds of things. Have kids' clubs ever kept minutes of their meetings?
Well, it's not so much minutes as, have a record of who was there, the attendance, what was discussed. It doesn't have to be minutes like this, but what did you do? Just so that the idea is to get the students familiar with the business world, even though this isn't typical of the business world per se, but it's a matter of documenting what you're doing. And she didn't see that happening, either on the financial level or at what she would call the secretary level of keeping minutes. So it's a combination of both that she felt as though to make this a more robust program is to get the students to get more involved with that aspect of what clubs are. It's just not to go there, and for some kids it is. Some kids it is, other kids, it's usually the kids are looking at the leadership in that. There's also that other component of record keeping.
So good clubs raise a lot of money. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Have a record of what's going on. Absolutely.
Deirdre?
Can I just ask a follow-up question on participation in the cafeteria program? Do we have any hypothesis as to why students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch would not take advantage of it?
there's various reasons. From they don't like what's being served,
Okay.
to some kids still think it's a stigma, even though you really can't tell who's paying, who's not anymore, because we have the point of sale system. But you still have it like at the high school where parents don't put money on account. Usually it's a cash transaction. So if a kid just puts his number in and that's it, yeah, I can understand, you know, people will start to think, oh. So there is still a little bit of that, but not like it was 5 years ago. It's a lot better in that respect.
There's no differential in terms of their access to the food offered, or
Oh,
it's
no,
all the same?
it's all the
right?
same, all the same.
I mean, I guess that would just be one concern I have, is if there's anything we can do to mitigate that any perceived obstacle to taking advantage of the benefit.
When Tom, didn't it, was it last year, or that when, basically, the way that people used to have to apply for free and reduced, but now we get all those.
Right.
We get, so people are listed as free and reduced that would maybe not have applied for it. So perhaps they're not buying lunch because they wouldn't have applied for it even though they're eligible for it, so.
They get
they're
letters
looking at-
knowing that they are eligible.
Right.
And they do get a chance to opt out of it. Just because you're eligible doesn't mean you have to partake. So we do have some families, they're in the total counts, but when they go through the line, they pay because their family said they don't want it. I've had that happen a number of times. And if you're eligible for free and reduced this year, you're eligible through the whole month of September. Then you get to October, you either have to reapply or, like I say, I don't think we get more than 20 or 30 applications a year, and we pick up about 140 to 150 through the database of Medicaid and SNAP people, families. So a lot easier to identify, but it doesn't mean they have to partake in the program.
Right.
And some don't. They're flat out refuse. Even when you sit there and you talk to them, listen, it's no cost, no one knows anything. No.
Right, I mean, I think that
They're just,
there's no one knows when they're going through the line that it's
Right.
free and reduced,
No.
right? No other kid, or there's
Nope.
nothing.
Well, it just, that might be something to bear in mind for the future, and also I think it's a good reason to, as you've already counseled, to be very mindful of not increasing the overall cost of a lunch. Just if there are families that aren't taking advantage, and it's difficult for some of them, we don't want to increase the cost if we can, for a basic lunch. Like if we can charge more for a la carte items or whatever, that might be.
no, there'll be some there,
Yeah.
increasing potato chips a nickel or something of that nature.
Yeah.
If it's recommended that cafeteria planning be part of long-range plan, maybe that committee would want to meet with a focus group of students to just
Good
ask
idea.
them, kind of randomly selected group of students to ask them.
All right, anything else for finance?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm sorry.
That's all right, go
Did
ahead.
you just call on somebody?
No.
Okay, good. So I put in your packets, and it was kind of straddles finance and facilities. So I put them in finance, but I could have put it in facilities just as easily. I wanted the board to be aware of the fact that we're going to be going out for a bond anticipation note relative to our capital project. You know, I didn't want to have us borrow $1,200,000 without the board being fully aware of the fact that that's happening. Not that we really have much of a choice. We are already having bills coming in from our design and constructional professionals, people who are doing testing, all the stuff that's got to run up to the submission of our planning to State Education Department for approval. So we and school districts typically pay for those costs unless you had so much fund balance you didn't know what to do with it, which we're not in that fortunate position, is to borrow notes in anticipation of the full borrowing for the project. That won't happen for another couple of years. So just so you all know, we're doing that, and it's going to be happening here in early.
Well, July 6th,
yeah.
July 6th is when we get the results back. The actual borrowing doesn't happen July 20th, 2 weeks later. So we'll actually know the rate who gets it on July 6th. So then they can prepare all the paperwork. And they even said that we have a couple choice. We can get all the paperwork done before the board president. It potentially changes. Yeah, like I said, we don't know who the president is theoretically until, you know, the reorg meeting. So they said we could actually, they said because our current president will not be here on the 20th. And I can't say if anybody else who potentially could be the president, whether they'll be here or not. So they've dealt with this a lot in the past, so they'll be able to, after the 6th, they know who has it, they can get all the paperwork together, and it really won't matter. We can sign this stuff on reorg night, no matter who ends up being the president. We just change the name of the president, not a big deal. It happens a lot for all school districts the beginning of July. So it's nothing unusual for that to happen.
So anyway, I just wanted to bring this to your attention. This is a fairly dense document, and it's not required reading, but for anybody who was interested, I wanted you to know what we're doing and to have this at your disposal. So it's been done.
Any questions on that? All right, move on to audit committee.
That's me. So we met with the internal claims auditor, Steve Bangert, and for the new members of the board, I just want to highlight that the audit committee, and you'll learn this whenever you do your board training, operates independently of the superintendent and the business official, although Tom is always at our meeting by invitation, and Joe is welcome at the board invitation too. So it's really an oversight function. And our charge, I think, says we meet 4 times a year, or more if need be. But Steve suggested that he would like to meet with the audit committee twice a year, which hasn't happened in the past. So board members, whoever serves in that audit committee, you might want to consider that. And sometimes, in all honesty, because we don't have an administrator driving the process, board members, whoever, there needs to be a chairperson who drives the organization of that meeting and the agenda and meeting times. So Steve has a lot of great information, and he serves as a claims auditor for Ulster BOCES, and he also was a school business official, so his insights are really valuable. A couple of things he just wanted to highlight that we should note as a board was sort of some challenges when we went through the transition with a new, not with the special education director now, but when we had an interim special education director, there's some claims processing issues and contract issues that he observed, because someone's kind of, in a transition, that person's just in a holding pattern. And not that anything untoward happened, but he just had some comments that we should be alert to the challenges of any kind of administrative changes when there are interims, and perhaps meeting with him regularly would give us direct contact with him. There are some challenges, there are some peculiarities, let's say, in paying Apple for Apple products, because Apple will not allow for purchase orders. So as you see in your minutes, Tom and Steve Jensen have a good system, but it's around gift certificates and using that, because Apple Store won't do purchase orders. It's important for the board to just know that, because claims auditors don't like that way of paying for things. We talked about the capital project and auditing oversight during the capital project. Steve has a lot of experience in building projects, so the board might, Tom and Steve just that morning, and sort of discuss the possibility of engaging Steve with more hours for auditing purposes. But if we also agree as a committee that the audit committee, might be useful if someone serves on both finance and audit through the capital project, so that the communication is more fluid, as many more contracts are going to be involved now because of the whole project. Really finance, because finance will be monitoring the financial aspect of and the audit will be kind of perhaps looking, and there was no audit committee during the last building project, so this is kind of new ground for us. As we all know, a determination that this school district is under fiscal stress by the controller is because of our low fund balance. And Steve Banker concurs with the administrators that we need to build that fund balance. And he was recommending a plan. Again, this works with the long-range planning of 3 to 5 years to rebuild it. It can be difficult for the community to understand the need to rebuild fund balance, and with this new legislation, of course, all that, nothing wrong with it being transparent, but you know, if you are underestimating or overestimating revenues and and expenses to build fund balance, that can be challenging for the community to understand. But the controller has said that, and we know that 0.5% fund balance is entirely inadequate. So, and the audit committee kind of really encourages the finance committee, clearly through the minutes this is the case, to be regularly monitoring that. Our Steve Jenkins asked about zero-based budgeting, which Steve Banger said could be done with supplies, but he doesn't recommend it for the bulk of our costs, which are labor costs. And we'll be, the audit committee will be responsible for monitoring an RFP to do external auditing services starting in 18-19. We then talked about the New York State Controller audit, so just to again give people context here that was clarified for Tom, which is that when the audit committees were formed because of a scandal on Long Island, and the state controller was auditing all the school districts in a cycle of about 5 years, and then we had an audit, and then this is another cycle. This cycle is 7 years, and we're early on in this 7 years. It's a cycle that has been legislated, so we're kind of done for now, so we don't know when we would get the controller here again. So just so people understand what that particular audit was about. They came and did a risk assessment, sampling different areas in the business office. No high-risk areas were identified, and then she decided, the auditor, to do the extra classroom fund. In part, it seems, she will present us a report, which will be probably a look at in the fall, but apparently, by Tom's account, it was because we're kind of really doing it right. Many school districts aren't really doing it right. So while there are some deficits in areas like involving kids more in record keeping, it seems like overall her impression was that, you know, we have good systems in place, we just need to improve them. Any questions?
Laura.
Just a quick question on the gift certificate or gift cards from Apple. Did Steve have any suggestions about a neater, cleaner way to do that? I mean, I know we're dealing with Apple, so it's a little tricky, but.
He said he knew of no way.
Okay.
This is basically the only way, unless we wanted to have an open credit card. And that's the last thing. I don't want that at all.
Some of the concern, I think, was around kind of oversight of teachers' requests, and the way that Steve Jensen's doing it, we cover that in that process. So I think we're covered with the best we can do with gift certificates.
Basically, the teacher requests the various different Apple apps, but Steve has to look at it. He looks to see whether or not they're, you know, for the education program. If they are, he says yes, and then overnight they get, you know, they get downloaded to the teacher's iPads or the class iPads, depending where it is. But there's not a whole lot of it going on. It's not a lot.
So it's like not less than $1,000 is spent this way, but it's not an optimal way to be making purchases organizationally.
But we've got checks in place.
It's all go into Bitcoin though, so. Steve Bannett's gonna have a heart attack.
All right, anything else for audit? All right, so we'll move on to facilities. So just to point out, in the packet is the agenda that we followed that is from Tetra Tech, and also the list of the draft list of alternate projects. First of all, the committee was asked to review a request from a group wishing to construct a memorial at Chancellor in memory of a deceased student. We do have a policy in place that, you know, says that the board has oversight over memorials. So it was brought to the facilities committee to look at it. You know, we were basically presented with a diagram of, you know, what their intention is. Policy on memorials also says that, you know, the group that wishes to place the memorial is responsible for, you know, gifting the materials or whatever's involved in placing the memorial to the school district. So, you know, we reviewed that. Seems like the request is reasonable, but need more detail. Like, you know, we basically were given a drawing, but it's not the scale, and, you know, trying to, you know, get more of a sense of, you know, how big it is, how much it's going to cost, that kind of thing. So more to come on that as we get the detail. And then we went into the project status review. So we reviewed the list of alternates. We spent quite a bit of time talking about the long jump, triple jump area in the track and field area of the grounds. So there was a couple of proposals for that. The main one is possibility of moving the jump area to the front of the property at the edge of the track, which is actually along the fence out by the student parking. But the construction manager is still working on pricing for all the alternates. So that was one of them, and until we have pricing on it, we really can't make a decision because we don't know how much it's going to cost. A new stack liner has been recommended for the chimney. If you'll recall from the last facilities minutes, the crack that's in the chimney is not as extensive as it was originally thought it might be, but they are proposing that we may want to invest in a stack liner for the chimney. Again, we don't have pricing on it, but that's to come. We also had a discussion about the lockers. And as you know, the lockers have been kind of an issue. So in the main area of the school, which is the first floor hallway of the original 1950 part of the building, and the upstairs, there's a code requirement that there has to be 8 feet of space between open doors on both sides of the hall, and we don't currently meet that requirement, even with the older lockers. So the architects have been working on various placement of lockers to try to determine, you know, if we could get the, you know, the target number is 125 per grade level, and they've determined that there's really no way to place the lockers such that we could place new lockers with bigger doors. You know, they've looked at putting them on opposite sides of the hall in different areas. They looked at, you know, moving further down the hall, but there's really no way to place them appropriately. So they're recommending that we should refurbish the existing lockers. Diane.
Just wondering why 125 lockers? Like our numbers don't meet that. Just wondering why that number. So
it's my understanding that 125 is a significant reduction in the number of lockers from what we already have, but it allows a little bit of growth in case, you know, a grade level has, you know, a bubble class or whatever, so that there's enough lockers for everybody. So in the other parts of the building, we're looking at half-height lockers, which would be wider lockers, but they would be you know, top and bottom lockers, and they would be new lockers, of course, and they would be able to fit in the space that we have. So that part of it looks good. It's been reviewed with the principals, and they're on board with the proposals. We reviewed the timeline for the project. The drawings and specs should be completed by June 30th. The target is to have SED approval by December and then go to bid in January. But the review time by SED right now is about 28 to 30 weeks. So that would push the bidding out to mid-March, which could, you know, potentially cause delays for items like doors and windows that have to be ordered. Work on the athletic fields would have to be done during the, you know, the off seasons, and lighting and ceiling work. However, and I'll let Tom talk about this a little bit, there's a new process that the state is looking to approve whereby school districts can submit their proposals to a third party, and the third party would review them. You know, we're assuming that it will be faster because they would have more resources and hopefully to review projects, and it's supposed to be approved around July 3rd, this process. So if we could get into that process, then we could hopefully meet our deadlines, but there's a cost for that. So I don't know, Tom, if you want to.
So yeah, when I went to a conference in November of last year, at that time, the wait time was 12 to 14 weeks. And now, 6 months later, it's out 30 weeks. A lot of projects were approved around the same time we did and earlier, and they're getting swamped up at SED. On top of that, a quarter of their staff is unfilled at this time. And at this time, they can't fill those positions because the state has not granted them the money and the ability to fill those positions. So they're sitting up there with not as much staff as they need. And some of them are very critical positions. But in the meantime, they've come up with a solution, and it was even talked about in years past. It just never has come to fruition. But it appears that it will, though we have not seen anything officially in writing. But the idea is that SED will have third-party architects and engineers review the projects to give them the go-ahead to go forward. But it does come at the cost of the school district. When you do send it through SED, it is no cost. You just wait in line with everybody else. And it comes in the line in which they come in. It does. You don't get to skip ahead of anybody or anything like that. Whatever it comes in, you're put in the queue, and it just goes along that way. So they introduced this third-party architecture and engineer review, but it is at the cost of the school district. The idea here is that by school districts that do divert away and go to the third party, will reduce the load on SED as it currently is, so will help get those projects through. Plus, theoretically, if everything's in order, we should be able to go through the process quicker. And it's not going to be in the queue and not even going to look at a project for 4 months. That's the problem. It doesn't take them long to review your project. It's just how long does it take till you get there. So if we're at the beginning of this process, the idea is that we would be one of the first ones to be able to do this process, so it should go fairly quickly. The issue is, though, we don't know what the cost is or which firms can be used, and is there set prices for these things. So those are things that we're kind of waiting on too. Now those monies would come out of the capital project, and we'd get reimbursed at 36.8% for those services. So we would get some back. So if it costs $10,000, the reality is it would cost us really about $6 grand. I'm just going to use 40%. It would cost us $6 grand. We would get $4,000 back in building aid. The problem is there hasn't been anything coming out of the state yet to let us know this is available. They've told us, but nothing's been put in writing to us. So we're kind of crossing our fingers here that we're going to see something here real soon about it to make up what's going on.
So I'll just add too, you know, the architects feel that because our project is mostly renovation type projects, there shouldn't be a big review process. There should be a fairly straightforward review. So if we can get into a quicker queue, we should be able to move along fairly quickly. There shouldn't be too many, you know, questions that would come back, and we'd have to answer those before they can move on. So, Diane?
First of all, it's outrageous that the SED would, to fix their backlog, they would make schools pay to fix their backlog. I mean, that's anyway. But I guess I would want to know what it costs, because, I mean, part of the planning for this was figuring 4-month wait time, right? For part of our planning, so we've already kind of planned to wait. So I guess it would depend on the cost, because if it's not going to really affect our timeline any, I don't know why we would pay a lot of money. Even
Well,
$10,000 is a lot of money.
we could completely miss next summer as a construction period.
Right, I mean-
Completely. I mean, that's the problem.
Yeah.
You're up at 30 weeks, and there was a lot of building projects at the same time that we went out to vote. They're all looking right now to put in too. So I don't know where that goes. I'm concerned about that. If we do go to SED, and it's 30 weeks, we're not getting it back till February. To get that out to bid and get it back, okay, now we're into May. Oh, you're gonna do the windows? It's 12 weeks before you get windows, and you've completely missed the summer to be able to do it.
But isn't that, I mean, part of our timeline was knowing that there's a backlog, though? I mean, that was.
Yeah,
part
but
of-
not that
this
long
much.
block,
Not
a
that-
backlog.
This backlog is very big. Typically, it goes to 20, 24 weeks. 30 weeks, it's been a long time since it's been at 30.
I mean, I think we'd have to know the price, and if, you know.
Yeah, I
what
agree
the
with
course.
you.
turnaround
I
is,
agree with
guarantee,
you.
though.
I agree with you.
No, we're not sitting here recommending it because we don't know the details. When we get the details, then we'll make a decision based on cost, timeline, increased construction costs, you know, that's
Yeah.
got to factor that in too.
Sure.
We don't know how we're going to go. We're just letting you know that's a possibility. We'll obviously track it closely and let you know when we have to make a decision. I couldn't tell you how it's going to go one way or the other.
Deirdre?
Yeah, I just agree with Diane and being very cautious and guarantees. I mean, if you're going to spend the money, then to have a guarantee of when it would be done by. I also would just say it's like political commentary. It could be entirely deliberate not to be filling these positions, and then you know, sort of entering the private realm. So privatizing some aspects that SED is responsible for, and then it costing school districts instead of just sending it to them in that process. So I would just be cautious about entering into the whole process.
But it was kind of funny, at the meeting it was said, about half the people were outraged, the other half were like, oh, good, I can get it through quicker. So it was kind of a mixed bag as to the reaction from it. I'm kind of up in the air, because believe me, it should go through SED. But
especially since they haven't filled positions. It's one thing if it was just some unusual situation when they're fully staffed. But
they can't even advertise for it, let alone, so they haven't even advertised,
there's something
let alone
deliberate
get
in
people
that.
into the process to hire them.
So that we can get to.
Yeah, it's not an accident.
And plus what's happening is the engineers that they have up there are leaving for private firms, because work is picking up out there. So they're seeing a lot of their own engineers leaving for better pay.
Steve?
Yeah, I would just really leverage the project managers to know what costs are going forward and as they estimate these different contracts. I mean, there certainly is money in there.
Oh, there's money within the
overrides
project.
that could absorb this.
That's what the soft costs are.
Right,
This is the
but
soft
I would
cost.
just want to make sure that if everything starts going up like that and we're nickel and dimed everywhere, then we're going to come short and have to cut back on the scope. So that would be my concern. But 4 months is, I mean, it's not going to be 4 months, it'll be 6, right? I mean, if it's 4 months now, it's only going to get worse as more projects are getting into the queue. So I think we should really consider this, but again, I would like to have some backup from the managers on the project.
Absolutely.
All right, so the final item is that the architects and construction manager will be here on July 11th at our full board meeting to give a presentation on the final project before it's ready to go out to SED or alternate review. So look forward to that next meeting.
Given that, are we going to plan to start a little early because the New York meeting takes so long, and if they've got a big presentation to do, it might, just a suggestion.
We could.
You know, up to the board.
I thought I'd wait, again, it's not a lot of time between now and July 11th,
Right.
but thought I'd wait and see how the agenda is shaping up. You'll notice a lot of things on your board agenda for tonight that I hope to kind of clear the decks of some of this stuff so we don't have a humongous meeting, but we'll see. That might make sense. We'll keep you posted on that.
All right, anything else for facilities? We'll move on to the curriculum committee.
The curriculum committee met yesterday. We had some brief conversation about just the end of the school year and getting some context on patterns in Regents exams, actually kind of coming out of the presentation Marvin had made to us earlier. In the full board, we asked for another update on the technology curriculum, and we focused primarily on the state of play in the middle school. As of the time of our meeting, he had received the final units for the middle school curriculum and had commentary from the consultant, Lori Keating, and her recommendations. So he is working toward a plan of bringing all of this to us to see and approve before school starts in September. And of course, curriculum committee will be reconstituted before that. We also spoke about the process for approval of summer curriculum works, which was extremely helpful for board members to know. Laura asked for an update on the next gen standards coming out of SED, and it's sort of a hurry up and wait situation. There are new standards being developed for math, ELA, social studies, science, and the arts, but the assessment schedule seems to be, relatively conservative, not coming out anytime very, very soon. Experts in the field are recommending working carefully through the proposed changes, and it's not really advisable for districts to run out and start investing in new materials keyed into the standards at this point. Obviously, what's happening at the federal level and the state level is highly volatile, mercurial. I'm not quite sure what the correct word is used. So again, it's hard to predict what we could be seeing even within a year. Really relying on experienced faculty has been important to get their sense of how to respond to these proposed changes. One really positive development that Joe highlighted for us is that the new commissioner, although she's not new anymore, our commissioner, has really tried to involve teachers in test construction as opposed to it just being something that is delivered by large companies. So it seems as if while these major curricular revisions are being discussed and worked through, it's not going to be with us super soon. And of course, we also talked about how important it is that our curriculum really is reflective of our own values here within the district. We've never been a district that's interested in buying something whole cloth and adopting it. It's got to be true to our sense of our mission. And of course, we thanked Deirdre also for all her work.
Questions? No questions? Oh. Seeing now, we'll move on to our annual review of board operational procedures. You have the policy 0310 in your packet, which says the Board of Education shall review the effectiveness of its internal operations at least once annually. So here we are.
And it's on your agenda because the policy says it will be on your agenda once annually. It's not on your agenda because the administrative team is seeing any operational issues, but you might. It's an opportunity to speak up or hold your peace until next June.
Deirdre.
Well, I just, when I saw this, I've looked in the past, different school districts do have different committees for very few, many.
Varies.
So, but I was thinking that our committee structure works well, I think. But at this time, I think they're all good committees to have. So in terms of internal operations, I think our committees, as well as like choosing board leadership and internal communication, but the committee seems to be like the biggest structural thing. It seems to be effective, but it's always something you can always look into other school districts and see what they do. I think we have more committees than a lot of, but I think that works well.
Well, we use them, I think, in a way that's reasonably effective, and I wouldn't make that statement necessarily for every other school district that has a good number of committees, but.
And given that you participate in all of them,
Yeah.
this could be an opportunity for you if you didn't think they were effective to
Yeah.
say otherwise. So it speaks
Yeah.
a lot about the effectiveness of it that you're still willing to spend hours doing this.
It's almost always good use of my time, I find. Sorry for the little hedge there. Almost always. Almost.
Diane?
When I first got on the board, the committees, like Audit, used to have like a head of the committee, and then we don't really do that anymore, a chairperson. And I don't know if it didn't work when I got there, and that's why we stopped using it, or if it was valuable. Because once I got on, we didn't do it anymore, so I don't know the reason for it, or if it's something we should think about doing. So maybe before you leave, Deirdre, you can.
My personal observation, if I may, on my committees, because we have done that in the past, is that we're all just too polite. That people get together around the table and no one wants to go like, we need a chairperson. So that's just it. So I think maybe if everyone agrees that Audit definitely needs a chair. I mean, we haven't really, but or you effectively have been the chair in the past. I sort of took on that role more this year. And also that has a community member on it. Paul Slayton has been on it. So, but it isn't a bad idea to do it in other committees. You just have to decide.
Yeah, it's not called out in policy anywhere, so
Right.
if that's how board committees want to run themselves, that's fine. And I don't recall not doing it for any reason like, oh, that's not working, so let's just round robin it. Just a new group of people, that's the way it's been done.
I was just wondering whether when the committee is only 3 people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Three to
and
five.
Joe.
And Joe.
Yeah.
And then
Tom
Tom
sometimes.
or Steve Jenkins.
So
Some of them have administrators
More like 4
on
to
them,
5.
but
Marvin, right.
So I mean,
it's
that
like
part
5
stays regardless, like the chair
Right.
would never be one of them.
Right.
So it's only 3 board members.
Right.
So I just didn't know whether it's that helpful. Maybe it is.
But it has to be that way, right? Because if there's more than 3 board members.
can't be more than 3 board
Right,
members,
but
then
I
you have
understand,
4.
is it that
Necessary.
helpful
Is it
to
necessary?
have,
Oh, I see what you're
to
saying.
have hierarchy,
Yeah.
your chair, your vice chair, and the third person?
And you're
Here.
Yeah,
You
I'll
hold the
just-
water.
I'll just
Like-
say,
Yeah.
and it's been very few years that I've been on the board that we actually had chairs for the board, for the committees, and it seemed like most of the time the chair wound up being the minute taker. And, sometimes the chair can't be there and somebody else has to do it anyway, so, or
the
we
chair
should
doesn't
postpone the
just
meeting
assign minute takers.
because somebody's doing it.
Exactly.
It's really effective to have. a
It's
chair.
only effective, I think. It's only necessary if you have a committee that's not functioning well. And so then it's awkward if it's not functioning well. But it could be said, okay, we need someone to actually chair this.
I think with audit too, you don't have Joe there driving the actual times you're meeting, so somebody does have to reach out, and you did that all of last year, this year, so.
One thing we do at work and for our staff meetings, because we only have 3 people, is we just rotate who sets an agenda. Every month we take turns, who sets the agenda and who takes minutes. And it just rotates through, and it actually works really well because then everybody has a turn leading and having a greater say and role to play, but it's not a constant responsibility.
Leave it to the individual committees to
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea, actually.
Yeah,
have, because some committees may need somebody to keep an eye on the agenda and not losing sight of things. And most of us seem to be pretty good in our committees about keeping the running agenda at the bottom of the minutes so we don't forget. Right. But, I mean, ebbs and flows of people, and, it's good to just sort of take stock of whether or not it's still working. Yeah. It seems to be. And we do rotate the minutes, as you can see. So.
All right. Anything further on review of operational procedures? Laura?
I wanted to sort of raise this about our communication with each other headed into reorg meetings and that kind of thing, about leadership, people who are interested in running, maybe making it known to the board that they're interested in running. So often I feel like, it's sort of one of those, you get the call a couple of days before the reorg meeting, and I'm going to nominate this person. Are you good with that? Okay, let's go. It would be, I think it would help us all collectively if we, if people are interested, they make their intentions known. If they're not, they're, happy to support our colleagues, but, sort of a little more transparent communication around that, I think, might be helpful in the future.
I'm not sure if this falls within operational procedures, but we discussed a little while ago about the possibility of moving public comment, the first public comment period, so that it's not the very first thing, so that when people come late, they don't miss it and then have to wait until all the way at the end. But I think it might be helpful to move the first public comment period a little further in, maybe after reports.
Diane?
The only thing I'm thinking is sometimes that first item can be a long one. And then it's in the beginning because so people can, like kids or people can, it can be. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to be more flexible and like leave it where it is, but say someone comes in after that point, maybe just give just allow for another public comment. Because it doesn't happen that often that someone comes in late. But it's more likely that people would be, here in the beginning instead of making them wait.
I guess it was more an issue with the budget workshop and a different interpretation of the word workshop. So, not having, people were frustrated that they didn't have time to give their input in the budget workshop. But yeah, I guess it doesn't really come up that often in the everyday meetings.
Well, I mean, if it's a concern specific to the budget workshop, I mean, it's apparent to all of us anyway that the budget workshop runs on a different schedule than a regular Board of Education meeting, which is also called out in board policy. Not that isn't anything that couldn't be changed if the board wanted to change it. I think I might suggest maybe considering a different placement of the public comment portion on a workshop, which we don't have a lot of those either. It's typically the budget workshop, and sometimes that may be the only workshop we do in a given year. Because if you look at tonight, okay, we're just finishing up reports and discussions, and then we have a public comment section coming right up. So that would be kind of ridiculous in the way tonight's meeting played out. So maybe it's more of an issue with the workshop structure, and next year we could consider doing something a little different with that kind of a meeting. It's a different meeting, it's a different structure, and regardless of whether we use the same structure as some private sector company, that's neither here nor there. I think it's the board's right to have its workshop meeting set up the way they wish. That's not to say we couldn't consider some other public comment scenario for those kinds of meetings. I mean, I'd certainly be open to looking at that when this thing starts to roll around next year. But
Laura?
Along those lines, maybe we should, I don't know how we're going to put this in a tickler file to remember for, next spring, but maybe we can put out some communications ahead of budget workshops to just sort of explain to the community how these are working sessions for the board in public. And, these are the moments when public comment are scheduled, so, just so people's expectations are set a little bit better.
Yeah, and, around that subject of the budget workshop, really it's a meeting for the board to hear and ask questions about the budget, and we've offered an opportunity for the public to make comments, because normally we're talking about cuts and things like that, and it gives the public an opportunity to weigh in on how they're feeling about what we've been talking about, not so much about the actual, the budget and how it's been drawn up and those kind of things.
I do think we'll remember.
Yeah, I think, one of the challenges, and I think with that particular meeting, is the workshop can look different year to year depending on how information has flowed and where we are and what kind of decisions have to be made. So, and the other thing is, like, the meeting itself is set up because we expect a lot of people as sort of like us in front, as opposed to, we've had workshops in the past where we close the square and the administrators join and we're really talking. And just like it can be confusing when we come to a lot of our meetings and motions pass unanimously, people are like, oh, no one's asking any questions. Well, they don't get here until we know that there's consensus on them. So people don't understand. At that particular workshop, we had a lot to mull over, but the information, most of it had been previously presented to us. So it creates a presentation that looks like, oh, we're just passive recipients and we weren't acting on anything, even though there have been months of meetings where we're engaged. So maybe even some explanation of the budget process on the website in fall. That is really an explanation. We're going to be discussing for a long time this budget at every meeting, because it can come down to the workshop being a moment where we've had to make actual decisions or really reformulate. And sometimes we are just kind of reviewing, and we all know what direction we're kind of going in, this way or that way, but no one else knows because it's the first time they're showing up. It doesn't look good for us, but it's really just, we've been talking about it. And the other thing I just want to say to Laura's previous point about board leadership is, like, maybe there could be like a day picked or a date where people, you could communicate to the rest of the board via email, I would like to be considered for president or vice president, because then if you are thinking about it, you just have all decided that, and you can do it via email. Then, like, what do I do? Who do I call? Is someone else calling? What does that mean? So if it's just like a procedure for everybody, just pick a date to say, if you want to do it by that date.
Yeah, it's sort of like we all thought about, announcing whether or not you were going to run for your seat again,
Right.
And that seemed to help bubble up new candidates because they knew there'd be available seats. I think it's communication's good.
Diane?
I wonder if the communicating to the public would be good at our open houses as a talking point for the budget, kind of, because that's tends to be right before we start talking about budget almost. It's like October, I think, or September. October. Just to say, that budget discussions will start as early as, like December. So, even though the workshop is in March, so maybe people realize to pay attention a little bit earlier.
I think I have a process question. So I like the idea of there being a kind of a declaration of interest for board leadership. We sort of need to know, though, at the organizational meeting who's being sworn in as the officers, right? Is that correct?
Well, that's when it's done.
The nomination takes place there. So there needs to be some interim decision or conversation moment before we come into the meeting, I think, unless we're going to we could just do multiple nominations in the organizational meeting and just vote. I'm just curious about how that's working.
As I understand it, the board president from this year carries over until a new board president is elected at that organizational meeting.
So there could just be a slate presented if there were multiple people who wish to run, or is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think what Laura's saying is if people declared their interest sooner than that night, might be helpful.
Right.
And I don't disagree that it
Yeah.
wouldn't be helpful. And if as a board you want to set a date between now and July 11th, then set the date and let people communicate to the other 6 what your interests or intentions are. And if you don't, then it'll be assumed that you're not interested. And so, I mean, you know, pick a date, July 1st. I could pick a date as easily as anybody else. If you're interested, email people that you're interested in X or Y or Z by July 1st.
Yeah.
See how that works?
Sounds good.
Maybe a good way to start would be Mark and Deirdre to announce your intentions. Either I'd like to run again, or I'm not interested, or I'd like to run for this or that. That could start the process, because it may affect people's decisions if they know, you still want to stay or you don't, or be the easiest way to kind of.
All right, anything else?
Excuse me, let me just clarify. No later than July 1st, people will communicate their intentions to their colleagues. Does that sound reasonable?
That's reasonable.
Okay. All right, so move on to good news. Laura.
Graduation was fantastic. Ed, thank you so much. The new format was fantastic. It was really great. It really felt like a celebration of the entire class. I thought it was really fantastic. It was great. It was really great.
Diane.
Yeah, I got a lot of comments. People were happy that it was a little shorter, and it felt good. So there was definitely positive around that.
Sunburn, it was good.
Other good news? Jack?
Similarly, the moving up ceremonies for the elementary and middle school were wonderful. I don't know if anybody else was at either of
Middle school.
Yeah, right, of course. They were beautiful. So, kudos.
Fun celebrations.
All right, any other good news before we move on to old business? Old business?
I would just like to bring to everybody's attention, and I purposely did not mention this under good news because this is not good news, but I put in your packet a listing of the bullet grants from our senators and our assembly people for this year that I received last week, and I just want to make sure everybody knows that we got a big fat goose egg from all 3 of our legislators. Just saying.
Never happened, hasn't it?
Just saying. What?
Has that ever happened? I mean, we sometimes get a paltry couple of thousand.
I can't remember when that's happened. I won't say it never has, but it's been a rare day when somebody doesn't come up with $9,000 here or $100,000 there. So, just saying.
Jack, did you ever read?
No, I mean, I did, but Deirdre answered.
All right. Other old business? All right, public comment. We have an opportunity for public comment. Seeing none, we'll move on to other. I do have one item of other, which is the list of board committees. I think I've gotten everyone's choices now. I just didn't have time to finish putting the list together, so what I'll do is I'll finish my spreadsheet that I was working on. I'll send it out to all of you because there's going to be a couple of places where we may have to negotiate or do something to settle those committee assignments before July 11th. So, Deirdre.
Yeah, we talked in audit about, like I said it in the minutes, about audit and finance having overlap. When you said facilities asked, I thought maybe that is the one that makes most sense. Like, you might want to just think about that.
It's really all 3, right?
Yeah.
So that was all audit, finance, and
No pressure.
You don't have to assign me to anything.
So maybe it is facilities then. So you know what the flow of, the facilities committee will be talking about the flow of contract work. So.
Yes.
It'll be pretty much that
Right.
for the next couple of years. I mean, that's.
So that would be where there should be some overlap, perhaps, if you guys agree.
And I would say, out of 3 people on each committee, it's very likely that at least one of those people people will be on both, but
Right.
we could try to
It's not-
figure out something so that somebody is on both. But anyway, I'll put that list out in the next week, hopefully, and then we can have some discussions about it via email if anybody has any changes they want to make or whatever. All right, so is there any other items of other? Okay, move on to action items. Is there anyone who would like to remove anything from the consent agenda? All right, so seeing none, may I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the summer 2017 Board of Education meeting schedule, July 11th, August 8th, and August 29th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of the 2017-18 CSE CPSE committee chairs, CSE CPSE parent members, and CSE CPSE committee members.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on those? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the list of emergency conditional substitute teachers and substitute non-instructional staff for the 2017-18 school year?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the 2017-18 course enrollment waivers? And I'll just point out that Dr. Davenport is here if anyone has questions about the enrollments for those courses.
So moved.
Second. Sorry, I lost my track.
I lost where we were.
Okay? Is there a question?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
I have a couple questions. Let's see. So the anatomy course, it's going to be one section of 38. So are we going to have 38 kids in it, or are you going to, is it going to be cut off at a?
No, there were 38 requests as of today. One section is capped at 24, which is standard for most of our science courses.
Okay.
So there will be a number of students who will not be able to take that course.
And how is that determined, the 24?
Our typical practice is to compare it to juniors and seniors upper class. We started seniors.
Okay. And then another question I have, was this the first year that we had, last year that we had anthropology and sociology? Is that, was last year the first year we had anthropology and sociology?
I believe this is the third year.
Third year, okay. So and then my other question, that wasn't really a question. So there's a couple classes that teachers are offering to teach in lieu of a duty. Do you find that you have enough teachers to do all the duties, or are we having to like supplement the duties with our aides?
Where we are right now, we have had enough aid coverage to cover study hall, so that hasn't been an issue. And we added math lab writing center to teacher schedules. And a couple of years ago, we had to add some aid time for a couple of study halls, and since that time, we've been able to work with our current staff. Okay, and then with these new courses, when did they? What was the process like? When did they come about? I mean, we heard about them, I think, at the last meeting. When the new courses? When did development? When did that process start? Our schedule cycle typically begins in late September, once the master schedule is pretty much set and there aren't any more schedule changes. The guidance department and I will send a memo to our staff informing them of the upcoming deadlines to the right following those master schedules, so everything about it. And one of the questions is for teachers to propose any new courses that they come up. And generally it's by the end of the first semester, students better later. When we have some proposals, we'll do some initial investigation, see if it's hard to duplicate in some way in our program. If not, I'll confirm with Mr. Fallon and Mr. Krebs, and then the board subcommittee and curriculum will be advised that we're considering adding this to our program studies. With that initial and tentative approval, we will add that course to our request form. It's not formally in the program studies, but we'll let students know, the guidance counselors will let students know that that course is available if interested and no guarantees. Then based on the number of requests, we'll take a final step and I'll make a recommendation to the superintendent that we would like to run that course in the
Usually do these courses require teachers to take, classes or something to teach them, or is it just that happens every once in a while?
It's the only courses recently that's been true of the project leading way courses where our teachers have had to train by PLTW, typically that's in Rochester. Otherwise, the courses are within their certification area, and the added expenditure would be typically writing the curriculum in the summer.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions on that? All right, so all those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of department chairs and advisors for Rhinebeck High School for the 2017-18 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve additional summer 2017 curriculum, program, and clerical work.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the donation of a pipe bender, vise, and pipe cutter with a combination value of $225 from Craig Decker as stipulated.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and we thank Mr. Decker for his donation. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes.
Yeah, I just mentioned that Craig Decker is a member of our maintenance staff, and I did ask Mr. Teeter if that was a piece of equipment that we could actually use, and he said, yeah, it would be great if we had that available to us. So
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, we have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept a grant from the Rhinebeck PTSO in the total amount of $389.25 in support of CLS Field Day as stipulated.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Thank you to the PTSO for their generous donation. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept a grant award from the Rhinebeck Science Foundation in support of funding for Project Lead the Way Gateway to Technology and Introduction to Engineering Teacher Training in the total amount of $4,949 as stipulated.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? And again, thank you to the Science Foundation for their generous contribution to our programs. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the donation of funds in the amount of $847.95 to the school lunch program to reduce negative student balances from an anonymous donor.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, Diane?
I just think this is probably a lovely gesture.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's really,
Definitely.
really.
And thank you to the donor, whoever he or she may be. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of department chairs for Chancellor Livingston Elementary School for the 2017-18 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the 2017-18 school year coaching staff. Soccer, boys varsity, Justin Weisenthal, $4,532. Boys junior varsity, Henry Frischknecht, $2,830. Boys modified, to be determined, $2,308. Girls varsity, Matt Grandy, $4,532. Girls JV, Mark Bird, $2,830. Girls modified, Anita Thompson, $2,308. Field hockey varsity, Mary Fleischhauer, $4,532. Volleyball varsity Ashley Wilsey, $3,612. JV to be determined, $2,567. Modified Chelsea Leahy, $2,308. Cross country boys varsity Chris Sneed, $3,469. Girls varsity Kim Sneed, $3,469. Modified to be determined, $2,209. Golf boys varsity David Jutton, $2,816. Varsity assistant Tony Rinaldi, volunteer. Swimming girls varsity David Airstock, $4,532.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, that's all except Fleischhauer, and Fleischhauer abstains. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of David Airstock to conduct athletic placement process testing for the 2017-18 fall sports season as necessary.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve 2016-17 budget transfers in accordance with Board of Education policy number 6150 for the school year ending June 30th, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Sorry,
Steve?
I'm jumping
All
in.
those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the following resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education, pursuant to the provisions of Education Law, Section 3012D and Part 30-310, 3.10 of the Regents Rules, hereby certifies that the following individuals have completed all of the necessary training to be recertified as lead evaluators of classroom teachers. Ed Davenport, John Kemitzer, Brett King, Mark Bird, Fern Locks, Steve Jensen, and Emily Davison. Be it further resolved that the Board of Education, pursuant to the provisions of Education Law, Section 3012D and Part 30-3.10 of the Regents Rules, hereby certifies that the following individuals have completed all of the necessary training to be recertified as lead evaluators of building principals. Marvin Krebs and Joseph Phelan.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion on that?
A quick
Laura.
question. Do you all have to take more coursework every year to get recertified?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, realistically, it's like 3 hours worth. It's not like
Sort of
a
online
course,
work
but
that you have to do?
no, we either go to BOCES for that or we bring somebody in to train our administrators. But that has happened every year.
Okay, anything else? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve an extension of the appointment of Sarah Schleister as long-term substitute in the position of elementary teacher at the Chancellor Livingston Elementary School. At the pleasure of the board, having commenced from the original period of June 10th to 23rd, 2017, and now through June 22nd, 2018, at the salary of BA Step 1 plus 1, $52,995 in accordance with the 2016 RTA salaries, or 2016-17 RTA salary schedule. This appointment extension is to fill the vacancy created by the leave of absence granted to Shannon Denise, elementary teacher at the Chancellor Livingston Elementary School.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to recall Megan Kraft from the preferred eligible list to resume her 4-year probationary appointment in the position of elementary teacher at the Chancellor Livingston Elementary School at the salary of MA Step 3, $63,439 in accordance with the 2016-17 RTA salary schedule.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to appoint mentors for the 2017-18 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to appoint Jeffrey Palazzolo to the 3-year probationary position of school counselor, effective August 1st, 2017, in the tenure area of school counselor at a salary of Step 9 MA plus 15, $75,790 in accordance with the RTA salary schedule for the 2016-17 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to appoint Carol McCurdy to the 10-month provisional civil service position of interpreter for the hearing impaired, assigned to Bolton Middle School effective September 1st, 2017. On step 9, $34,203 in accordance with the ANI salary schedule for 2017-18 with a 26-week probationary period.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the following permanent civil service appointment. Rosita Castellano, food service helper, effective July 12th, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the following resolution. Whereas upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education, for economic considerations and the efficiency of the program, has determined that it would be appropriate to abolish one part-time teacher aide position in the school district. Therefore, be it resolved that the board hereby abolishes one part-time teacher aide position and directs the district clerk to notify the affected individual that his part-time teacher aide position will end effective the close of business on June 30th, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of the discussion of the employment history of a particular person.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes.
I don't want to do that.